more on U.S. tax inversions, we bring in Henley Smith. He is the Senior Vice President at Vanderbilt Avenue Asset Management. Henley, good to see you.
Thanks, Mel, for having me in. Thank you very much.
Henley, some tough talk from President Obama. He called these tax inversions insidious. Now we have the Treasury adopting the strictest set of regulations to date. What are the implications of this?
Well, again, I think everyone is for free markets and fair markets. So I think we really have to get to the crux of the problem of why these dollars and these companies are moving overseas. But again, I think maybe this is a populist move by the president. Again, in a political year, it makes some sense. But I think we really do need to focus on what is the crux of the problem and why are these companies moving overseas. Is it economic or is it tax avoidance?
We'll get to the tax rate in a minute, but the president is saying that this is really hurting middle-class America, that these tax inversions, these corporate loopholes are hurting your average Joe, the people that are paying hard and paying their fair share of taxes. How much do these inversions damage the U.S. economy?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And as someone that's about to file his taxes on the 15th of this week, I think most people are looking at those. People are hardworking. They're paying their fair share. They want to make sure that big corporations are paying their fair share too. And that's why I think it's kind of a populist move right now, where you see these companies being vilified because it's big companies making moves and it's hurting the small person. And I do think it brings jobs overseas, which I think needs to be addressed. But at this point, again, I think we really focus in on free markets ultimately will be the right way to move.
Well, the argument can be made that tax inversions do allow corporations to save billions on taxes, and that those saved dollars can then be injected back into the economy, back into research and design, analysis, into job creation. What do you say to that?
I would agree with that 100%, because what we found at Vanderbilt Avenue, and what we do is we manage liquidity for large corporations. And we saw this trend happening about 4 or 5 years ago, where we were going to large institutions and saying, you know, we want to manage your liquidity, but most of that liquidity was held overseas. So there's got to be a way to have that cash liquidity and the avoidance of taxes stay here in the U.S. so it can create jobs, and I think that's the real point.
Well, then is the crux of the matter simply changing the corporate tax rate? You have these multinational corporations based in the U.S., and they're saying they're just not competitive. In the Pfizer deal, for example, the corporate tax rate in the U.S., at the top end, 35%. Clever accounting, good deductions, Pfizer would have paid around 25%,
right,
compared to in Ireland, 12.5%. If the tax rate just isn't competitive enough, surely that's what perhaps needs to be changed, the U.S. corporate tax rate.
I think it needs to be looked at. I think it needs to be fair as well. But I think a lot of these loopholes need to be closed, and it needs to be simplified, just as personal taxes probably should be simplified as well. So I think if corporate treasurers and CFOs can count on exactly what the tax implications of a deal are going to be, great. But if the government's coming in at the end, at the 12th hour, and changing the rules, I think I can see where corporate executives would be upset by that.
Their bottom line is to make money.
Right.
To make earnings, profits for their shareholders. And if the better tax rate is overseas, why not take advantage of that? It's not necessarily an evil, illegal thing to be doing.
Not at all.
It's good business.
In fact, it's good business. It's what we're here to do as businessmen, is to create profits for our shareholders or for our other people. So yeah, I do think that that's the way it should be. That's what capitalism is all about. And but again, changing the rules in midstream, I think, is a little fishy.
But not changing the regulations. What about changing the actual corporate tax rate? At what point would the U.S. still be competitive in the global scheme of things, but still allow corporations to be giving back to the economy in a fair and sustainable manner?
Yeah, I think there has to be a happy medium, and we'll ultimately find that. I think the first thing to do is to simplify these tax codes for these companies. Again, close some of these loopholes so we know exactly what we're dealing with. Lower that tax rate to some point where it's fair and competitive. And then I think you'll see
what point would that be, do you think?
I'm not a tax attorney, so I wouldn't know, just a businessman. But I would say that, again, at some point there's a happy medium there. And I think we'll achieve that because, again, as businesses, as we international and globalize, and that continues, I think there'll be a happy medium that we'll find.
Well, where do things stand now? The Treasury has enacted these new regulations, but it's not sufficient to close these loopholes. Congress still needs to take action, right?
That's absolutely right. And so we'll see what happens. But again, it's a political year. So it could be a political hot potato for the Republicans or the Democrats. I think the president's stepping up now and stating his case, and we'll see what the candidates go on from next year.
What about the countries that are the beneficiaries of the tax inversions on the flip side? The Irelands, for example, that then do have the headquarters supposedly moved over there. How do they get impacted by all of this?
Well, again, I think if there's an economic value to it, those companies that will benefit. I mean, I think there's going to be some equalization, if you will, of the tax rates. It's got to happen as we globalize. But if there's an economic value for those companies to move to Ireland, say, that will continue. Those dollars or that capital will follow.
Okay, complicated matter. Thank you so much, Henley Smith, Senior Vice President at Vanderbilt Avenue Asset Management.